Welcome to Weaver's Beyond the Numbers Real Estate Podcast. I'm Rob Nowak, real estate industry tax partner with Weaver, and I'm joined as always by my partner, sometimes collaborator, Howard Altshuler, Weaver's partner in charge of real estate services. As a reminder, this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here constitutes professional advice. If you have a question, call your accountant, or more importantly, call Weaver. You can always go to weaver.com to find all of our content, white papers, live casts, transcripts of the show, and more. That's weaver.com. Howard, new face in the studio today. Who's joining us?
Well, thanks, Rob. Today we're joined by Bruce Zaret. Bruce is one of our partners in our advisory practice who spends a lot of his time with financial institutions and real estate. What we want to talk about today is something that's very important to real estate, which deals with real estate financing. Specifically, we want to talk about interest rates, and we're going into reference rate reform. So, Bruce, the question that everybody's been dying to know is, what is reference rate reform?
Yeah, and that is the million-dollar question. And if you can remember back in 2008 when the financial crisis happened, people were relying a lot on LIBOR. And if you know the history of LIBOR, it is a rate that can be altered or manipulated by, it's a survey of banks, and it uses a lot of models to try to come up with a forward rate. And so being such a rate that can't be manipulated, the market said, hey, we have need of a new type of rate that can be more stable and more predictable. And they introduced SOFR, the secured overnight borrowing rate, financing rate. And so that rate basically is going to be based on the U.S. Treasury short-term repo market rates. And so it'll provide more stability and less manipulation into the market.
Okay. I remember reading a little bit about the scandal, shall we say, with respect to LIBOR and the rate setting and everything, which I guess prompted all of this. But you said, LIBOR was, forward-looking, which it would appear to me that most interest rates should be forward-looking because it's a, element of what's going to be happening in the future. So how does SOFR differ from that? And is it really backwards looking, or is it more transactional based?
Well, it is. Yeah, it is more transactional based. We'll be using transactions in the repo market, and it won't be just at one point in time. It'll be an average over a period of time. And a lot of the questions I get asked is, well, the rate's going to fluctuate because these short-term rates fluctuate. And banks have introduced a cap into this to where the rate won't be exceeded. And so you can basically get your rate into a certain range, so it's not going to fluctuate, significantly over the term of either the derivative or the duration of the loans.
It would seem to me, though, that because it's based on actual data, it's going to be a more reliable rate. Is that a fair statement?
It is. That's what's anticipated, is that this will be, more predictable, more reliable, rather than people just giving their opinions or being able to alter where they want it to go in the market. And so, LIBOR presented a lot of problems, and so that's why they needed to phase it out.
Got it. And you mentioned that it was going to be based primarily on like repo rates and such. So that sounds like that's pretty rock bottom near risk-free territory. So I'm assuming it's going to be, the loans we're going to see are going to be SOFR plus, as much as most real estate people would love to say that their deal is risk-free as well.
No, that's correct. It'll be SOFR plus. And so, and that plus will introduce the risk element into the equation, as it does right now in the finance markets. It's all about risk, and that's where your rate's going to be based on. So this will be SOFR plus. And again, in order to create some stability in that, the banks, there's I think 16 to 20 banks right now that have a cap instrument. So you'll be able to cap the top of that rate.
Like any other variable rate loan.
That's correct.
Who's compiling all that data, Bruce, that goes into SOFR? Is there a government body, a committee? Where's that data coming from? Since it's not obviously going to be based on bank, opinions, so to speak. Who's compiling it?
Yeah, so the Federal Reserve Board and the New York Fed, the New York Fed Bank, have designated. It's called the Alternative Reference Rate Committee. So there's a committee, and it's comprised of primarily private sector organizations, from banking, investment funds, insurance, pretty much the financial market is represented. They are dictating how that rate gets rolled out. And the rate's already getting quoted. It's being quoted starting in the first quarter, toward the end of the first quarter. So you can go and see SOFR quotes right now. And so that alternative reference rate committee will be monitoring and have the oversight responsibility for the rate.
So LIBOR's already started to be phased out in some transactions. Is there sort of an ultimate sunset date when the data won't be available?
That's right. They're anticipating right now at the end of 21 is when they'll stop quoting the LIBOR rate. However, I read today that they may be extending that into 2023 because people just aren't prepared for it. But as it stands right now, LIBOR will not be quoted after 12/31 of 21.
Yeah. Well, how many times did 606 get extended for revenue recognition and 842 for leases? I know, Rob, you're going to tell me once they enact a tax law, they're done. We're a lot slower on the accounting side of things. But
I fell asleep while you were talking about accounting standards there for 20 seconds. I'm sorry.
And as you both know, there is an accounting standard. It's ASU topic 848 that addresses rate reform. And so it talks about some of the transition issues and how that, depending on what rate you lock into, you may lose your hedge accounting status. And so there's a lot of people that are preparing for this transition by inventorying all the different instruments that they have that are LIBOR dependent and trying to figure out the strategy of how they can keep the hedge accounting and not have any financial statement impact upon transition.
Well, hopefully the FASB can figure out a way to be pragmatic. They've been working on, they seem to be getting better at that over the last few years that I found. So Bruce, accounting issues aside, what are some of the implications that people should be expecting from this change?
Yeah, I think really you have to look at it from a contractual perspective. And I think that the changes are going to might be more collateral, depending on where your rate ends up. It could change again. You could have some gain or loss in your P&L. I know we're trying to talk about some of the other things, but I suspect it's going to have some big implications when it comes to just your overall financial structure. If you don't get a handle on the overall impact that this is going to have on your current leveraged ability, or if you're a bank, any products that you offer.
Got it. So let me ask this. Let's say like you're at a loan right now at LIBOR plus 375 basis points. Is kind of the expectation going to be that you're going to be at SOFR plus 425 basis points and your overall interest rate's probably not going to be that much different? Or can we expect big changes in the actual amount of interest that's getting paid?
Well, I'll say that you may expect a difference. They're trying not to have any difference at all. And that's why they're having this transition in place. But right now, as it stands, the LIBOR has about a 20 basis point difference from SOFR as it stands right now. So if people want to bridge that gap, they're probably going to have a derivative product in place in order to gap the difference and to make it equal to where their LIBOR rate is.
That's about all the time we have for today. I want to thank Bruce for being our guest. Bruce, you didn't know this when you signed up, but by being a guest, you do get a complimentary Weaver sticker to add to your back wall, just like Howard has those 3 on his. Everyone, please help the show grow. Visit Weaver.com to download this episode. Find us on Spotify. Find us on iTunes. Follow everyone on LinkedIn. Bruce, Howard, and I, we want to thank all of you for joining us, and we especially want to thank Bruce for being our guest today. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Bruce.